nefarious nightmare contains themes that may be explicit or triggering for some. Specific warnings and disclaimers will be mentioned in the show notes. A nefarious nightmare assumes all parties that are mentioned in these cases to be innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. Listener discretion is strongly advised. You can help us grow the show by leaving us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcast or Spotify, or you can join our Patreon for lighthearted bonus content. With this, welcome to Season 5.
In order to escape accountability for his crimes, the perpetrator does everything in his power to promote forgetting. If secrecy fails, the perpetrator attacks the credibility of his victim. If he cannot silence her absolutely, he tries to make sure no one listens.
Judith Lewis Herman, and
I am not your dog that you whistle for. I'm not a stray animal you call over. And I never have been, nor will I ever be, your baby.
Joy Jennings.
Today, we will be diving into global statistics of sexual assault and reporting, explain a little bit about a theory we have about how sexual assault survivors are often re-victimized again, and then we will be hearing from our friend Ebony, who is the host of many podcasts, including the Sweet and Sour Nuggies podcast. Her heart is beautiful, but her story will shatter you. With that, I'm Amanda Cronin.
And I'm Courtney Fenner, and A Nefarious Nightmare presents Still Minding the Beehive, Surviving Sex Crimes, Part 11.
We don't really have any housekeeping to get out of the way, but we want to take a quick moment to tell you that as of the day this recording is live, we will have returned from the True Crime and Paranormal Podcast Festival in Austin. We would like to thank Lainey Hobbs, who, by the way, is the voice you hear in all of our intros and exits, but we'd like to thank her once again for her hard work in hosting such an amazing event. And a shout out to everyone we saw there. Also, we want to not only thank Apple Podcasts for featuring us in the new and noteworthy section of True Crime, but we also want to thank the many new listeners of our podcast for lending us your ears. We hope you stick around, and we are so incredibly grateful that you are willing to hear what these survivors have to share.
While researching these cases, we've noticed a bit of a pattern where victims of sexual assault are more likely to find that it happens a second, third, or even fourth time. It could happen with the same partner, such as through spousal rape, or it can happen at the hands of multiple assailants. There is data to support the theory that victims of sexual assault can sometimes experience re-victimization. Research indicates that survivors of sexual assault may face challenges such as victim blaming, disbelief, and secondary victimization when reporting the assault or seeking support. This is one of the many reasons we continue to remind anyone listening that victim blaming and shaming is more harmful than helpful. While a select few people may argue that this isn't their problem or that a tiger can't change their stripes, it's important to correct that thought process as everyone handles trauma and reactions very differently. Not only can shaming and blaming hurt an ongoing case, it can further traumatize them and discourage them from seeking help. This can also open them up to vulnerability in which a perpetrator or would-be assailant will see it as a prime opportunity to strike and then take advantage. With all of this, it's important to create a supportive environment for survivors and promote awareness about these issues. If you happen to be one of those quote-unquote tiger can't change its stripes types, or want to say, quote, it's not my problem, then I encourage you to either just walk away and say nothing, or to educate yourselves. But please, do not be the problem.
Sexual assault, or rape, is an illegal act where someone forces or threatens another person into having sex against their will. It's a problem that's spread all over the world. Now, the tricky part. Getting accurate statistics on rape is a real and even sobering challenge because most victims of sexual violence choose not to report it. And you really can't blame them because there are so many reasons why they feel like they need to keep silent. It could be from embarrassment, the fear of being judged or shamed, or even the fear of retaliation from the assailant. And they might even be afraid of how their own family will react.
This right here is something we have come to find out in several of these cases we've covered. We live in a world where victims and survivors are often stigmatized and blamed for things that happen to them. Even well-meaning people will unknowingly shame someone. We dove into this extensively in previous episodes in this series, but it does happen. With that, it is no surprise that people feel the need to keep tight-lipped. So, knowing all of this, it's not a shock that we've got a long way to go when it comes to tackling this issue.
As we all know, sexual assault is a serious issue in the United States. According to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, approximately 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men have experienced rape at some point in their lives. The terms of reported cases, the Bureau of Justice Statistics estimates that there are around 433,648 incidents of rape and sexual assault in 2019. It is important to note that these numbers only represent reported cases, and the actual prevalence of sexual assault is likely higher due to underreporting.
Now, we do realize that sexual assault is a worldwide issue, so we wanted to give a sobering analysis of statistics. With that, we tried to compare rape statistics between countries across the globe and found that while it was shocking that Sweden had the highest number of reports, it was also very difficult to compare them all. A quick sidebar, speaking of Sweden's high reporting statistics, is that while the number is alarmingly high, it also gives a little bit of promise and hope as Sweden seems to be doing something right in the way of encouraging reports. Sweden's prominently elevated rape rate serves as a notable illustration of this entire situation. Between 2013 and 2017, Sweden recorded an average of 64 reported rapes per 100,000 residents, a figure that was tied for the highest in Europe. Yet a closer examination of the data revealed that Sweden's higher statistics were substantially influenced by its broader rape definition and more comprehensive reporting protocols in comparison to fellow European nations.
While the above sidebar is arguably the best case scenario, it's noted that the variations in all legal definitions and reporting methods make global rape statistics complex and hard to compare accurately. This can lead to significant discrepancies and challenges in analyzing data across different countries. According to worldpopulationreview.com, statistics include the fact that some countries consider that any non-consensual sex to be rape. Others classify a sexual assault as rape only when it exceeds a certain threshold of violence. Some countries acknowledge spousal rape, others do not. Some countries count any report of rape, others count only those instances that proceed to a legal trial. Some countries include non-consensual and sometimes also consensual sex with a minor, typically classified as statutory rape, in their rape totals. Other countries place any sex with a minor, consensual or not, into a separate category. Some countries confine the definition of rape to forced vaginal penetration during sexual intercourse only. Others consider any unwarranted penetration of the mouth, anus, or vulva with any body part or object to be rape. Some countries track only male on female rape. Others also track female on female, female on male, and male on male rape. Some countries count each individual assault that occurs between the same people, for instance, a child and a relative, or a man and his estranged fiancé, as its own separate incident. Others add all the incidents together and count them as one single rape. Similarly, some countries count gang rapes as a single incident, regardless of how many individuals participated. Others count gang rapes as multiple instances, once per participant minus the victim or victims.
This is just a small example of the diverse ways countries define and report rape statistics. These variations indeed highlight the complexity and challenges associated with comparing and analyzing global rape data. The differences in definitions, reporting criteria, and categorization can lead to significant discrepancies in how incidents are recorded and accounted for. This makes it crucial to interpret and use such statistics with a clear understanding of the context and limitations involved. Despite the variations in data collection and reporting approaches, it remains evident that rape is a significant and widespread concern across the globe.
The thing is, addressing the issues of sexual assault in the United States might be helpful and is certainly a good start, but it is also important that we recognize that it is a global issue. For example, in Australia, the statistics of sexual assault are equally as alarming. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics in 2019, there were 24,807 sexual assault victims reported to the police. This represents a 6% increase compared to the previous year. It is estimated that only 1 in 5 sexual assaults are reported to the police, indicating that the actual number of victims is likely much higher. Women are disproportionately affected, accounting for 85% of victims. Indigenous women are particularly vulnerable, with rates of sexual assault more than double that of non-Indigenous women.
If you were to compare the statistics of the US with Australia, you'd note that violent crimes of rape and assault had nearly identical rates for the two countries. Victims in the two countries appeared equally likely to report the crimes to the police, except in cases of rape, where the reporting rate in the United States was double that of Australia.
Sexual assault affects individuals of all ages, races, and socioeconomic backgrounds. It is crucial that we continue to raise awareness, support survivors, and work towards preventing these heinous crimes. These statistics only highlight the urgent need for comprehensive prevention strategies and support services to address this issue in Australia, along with the US and in general, globally.
Today, we'll hear from a friend of ours who is from Australia. As we mentioned earlier, we had noticed a common theme where someone who was sexually assaulted does seem more likely to be sexually assaulted once again, at least. As you will hear her bravely recount what has happened to her, you will see that she is another addition to this theory. After speaking with her and hearing a few episodes on one of her own podcasts, we decided to offer our platform to her as well. She's never been fully allowed to let her voice be heard, but we wanted to change that. She is right there with us, where she really truly wants to see change occur. With that, meet Ebony.
Hello, my name is Ebony. I'm 30 years old. I live in Melbourne, Australia. I adore horror movies and film in general. I listen to literally all sorts of music. And these days I'm very much a homebody. I don't go out much, but when I do, I love spending it with friends. And yeah, that's really it about me, to be honest. There's not much to me. So I host 3 podcasts. One is called the Film Spark Podcast. I review movies. It's a movie every single week. Some I've seen before, some I haven't. A lot of random shit. A lot of indie horror as well. On top of that, I've just started doing YouTube for that podcast as well, so I've got more of that coming out. And I do a fair bit on Patreon for exclusives, so non-stop. The other podcast I have is called Sweet and Sour Nuggies. It is a mental health podcast. It's called Sweet and Sour Nuggies because it's the sweet and sour stories of life. It's how I see it. It's personal situations and how I get through things. It's extremely raw. I don't really edit anything. Some episodes are topics, some episodes is just how I'm feeling. Some episodes is me completely breaking down. I go through a lot of my past experiences, I go through how I deal with it now. It's dark. It can get very dark, and it can get a lot for some people, but honestly, it's probably the thing I'm most proud of is that podcast, because the people I have reached out to, or that have reached out to me because of that podcast, say that I make a difference, and honestly, that's all anyone can ever ask for. And my lucky last podcast, because I have 3, is the Shooters and Hooters podcast. Sounds interesting, I know. Shooter being Don, who's my co-host. It's a hockey podcast. He's played hockey all his life, hence the Shooter name. Hooters, because I'm a girl and have hooters. we thought it rhymed and it went well, so we went with it. We discuss all things hockey plus other sports plus the most random shit on the planet. It's a bit of everything. It's fun, it's silly, and we have a really good time doing it. So yeah, they're my 3 podcasts: the Film Spark podcast, Sweet and Sour Nuggies podcast, and the Shooters and Hooters podcast. So the first incident happened when I was about 11, maybe, give or take. My mother was a little too friendly with pretty much everyone. She got... Her family lawyer sort of became like a family friend in her mind, to the point where I would be babysat by our family lawyer while my mum went out drinking, which was a lot. And what would happen is she would drop me off. Mind you, this is a man in his like 50s at the time. And she would drop me off, and for the first hour or 2 it was just myself and him before his wife got home. And what would happen is he would put on a movie or a show, usually a movie, and it would start off okay, and then as time progressed, it went from sitting on the couch together to he would like massage my feet, and then the hands would slowly wander into other places, and I didn't think anything of it as a kid. I didn't really know, like it not that it felt comfortable or anything, but I didn't know that what was happening was out of the norm. Like I was so young, I didn't know any different. The only time it would ever really trigger anything or give me like a red flag is I would notice that he would be really close and touchy-feely, and then his wife would walk in and he would like push me aside, and we'd have like a meter or 2 between us. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is normal, this is fine, and then it turns into, why are you pushing me away? Is this not okay? Should this not be happening? He'd also watch me in the bath or shower. He would always say it was for safety reasons, but I was old enough to have a fucking shower or bath by myself. I didn't need to be watched over. And he did every single time. I did actually raise this with my mother at one point, and she said that he helps provide and gives her so much money that I should just ignore it. I mean, he was going to pay for me to go to private school. I was meant to go to an all-girls school, and he was going to pay for a lot of it. I didn't get in, thankfully, but that's pretty much where it started. From after that, there was another family friend. He also, again, in his 50s, and when I was growing up, we sort of lived in I suppose you could call it a share house. It wasn't really a share house, it was more just housemates. My mum, my sister and I had one end of the house. This family friend had another corner of the house. And from memory, there was someone else living, like another family friend. But the one in question lived at the very end of the house. And I was really close to him, like as a friend, as like, it was almost like a grandfather in a way. I'd go down and watch movies and TV shows with them all the time, and a lot of the time I would fall asleep down there. So much so that I would fall asleep and like watching a TV show or something, because he introduced me to a lot of shows like South Park, which now looking back at it, I can see probably was kind of a hint as to what was to come, because it was a lot of adult shows that he showed me. A lot of shows that I shouldn't be watching at the age of like 11. He would, well, sorry, not he would, I would fall asleep and pass out on the bed, and I thought nothing of it. Sometimes I'd wake up in my own bed. I just thought I got carried to bed. It is what it is. One night I woke up and he was standing over the bed, over me. The TV was just in front of the bed, and he had porn playing and was pleasing himself while leaning over me on the bed. So I sort of just laid there, and it was very much fight or flight mode. I froze, I became very still, and I wasn't even in the moment by the end of it. I sort of just pictured myself elsewhere. And, you know, he'd finish, which meant he'd finished on me. Now, thankfully, I was under a cover, so I didn't have anything on me, and I think that's how, I have a feeling that he'd done it multiple times, and that's how he got away with it every time, is I wouldn't wake up feeling any different, because it was on his bed and not direct on me. Once again, I told my mother. My mother turned around and said, well, he's old, he doesn't really know what he's doing, just leave it. He doesn't know any better. Mind you, it's not like he had Alzheimer's or anything. He was literally in his 60s, I think, late 50s at the time. Like, he knew what he was doing. There's no, like, playing sanity or insanity or anything like that. Like, he knew what he was doing. So they were the first 2 times, as I said, both of which my mother knew about, neither of which she cared about. I later on moved in with my dad, who I told, and he actually tried to, or didn't try, he was going to take the lawyer to court, but it turned out that he was already in the middle of a case for doing exactly the same thing to other kids, and he was in the middle of a trial. And because at that point there'd been a few years since I'd last seen him, between then and moving in with my dad. So my dad sort of just left it and said he's going to get the karma he deserves. I, to this day, don't know what happened. I don't know if he got charged. I don't know if everything was dropped. I don't know if he's still practicing. I have no idea. And honestly, I don't even care at this point. Like, my mind and my life is so far ahead that I want nothing to do with it. The next would be the first boyfriend I ever had. My first boyfriend, I was 14 and he was a year or 2 older, I think 2 years older than me. And, you know, it started off okay. It started off fine. We were a couple. It was what it was. However, I was very hesitant to make out or sleep with or any of the sort with him, and that didn't go down well with him. In the beginning, it was a lot of just playful fighting, maybe a little push here and there that from the outside wasn't appropriate, but to us, I didn't know any different. Then it would go from that to, there was one point where he pulled me aside and he had a drink, like a chocolate milk, and he poured it all down, would pull open my clothes, so pull my skirt in such a way at school and pour the milk down my clothes, and would stop and then just laugh at the situation. Absolutely humiliating. Then that sort of progressed from there. From there it went into, well, I'm going to try and force myself on you. And I remember this one day at school, I was walking between the two buildings and I didn't see anyone around, and he came up out of nowhere and sort of pushed me to the ground. He mounted me and continually tried to force himself on me, to the point where, thank God, I need him, because if I hadn't, I can 100% tell you he would have absolutely continued right there and then on the school grounds in the open. He wouldn't have given a shit. He wanted what he wanted, and that's all there was to it. And I'm so lucky and thankful that I need him, because not everyone is that lucky. But then what happened after that is, obviously that caused a bit of a rift between us. I was very hesitant to be even with him to begin with, or to follow with after that. And then I found out that he had a huge thing for my friend. Mind you, everyone had a huge thing for my friend. My friend was very well developed. She was, I suppose, an apple in everyone's eyes. Everyone wanted her. She didn't care either. I was the opposite. I was borderline anorexic. I wasn't really developed at all. And yes, so I found out that he was trying to get with her on the side, and I got a lot of, well, if I was with her, then she would do this and this and this. Why don't you do this and this and this? What, you're just... and it turned into name calling, which to me doesn't make any sense. It's you're gonna call me a slut and a hoe for not sleeping with you, and you're making it very clear to everyone that I'm not sleeping with you, because that was the issue, and you spread the rumors around saying, I'm frigid and I'm not going to sleep with you, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, and then you turn around and tell everyone I'm a slut. It makes no sense. But in order to please him, or at least what I thought would please him, I started taking pictures of myself and sending them to him as a, this is what's to come, the weight's worth it, whatever else you want to call it. It was only top half, was only the chest, but I thought I was sharing pictures between a boyfriend. I thought I was sharing private photos between a boyfriend and I, but it turns out that everyone and their dog had a copy of these photos, and it was everyone at school, and it got around, and teachers found out, and became this really big thing. I was essentially the poster child at school for why you don't do that. And then from that came the teasing, because they're like, well, why are you even sending these photos? There's nothing there. And then I'm already I'm 5'9". At the time, I was extremely thin. I have broad shoulders. I've been a swimmer most of my life. There are some attributes to me that people would call boyish. So when you have a figure that people already call boyish, and then you're adding on top of that photos that are pretty much confirming that there's nothing there, you may as well be a boy, in their words, then you get ridiculed. And it goes around, and you get nothing but hate and horrible, horrible words and rumors spread about you. And I dealt with that for years. I was at that school for 3 years before I changed schools when I moved in with my dad, and to this day half that stuff still haunts me. And to think that, you know, that was meant to be my first boyfriend. That was my first experience to what I thought was love. And all it was body shaming and ridicule and forcefulness without being specific. And that's that. After you've already dealt with the 2 incidents that I spoke about previously, then you go into this sort of, you know, territory. You start thinking that's all you're worth. You start thinking, is there even anything more to sex, to love, to being in a relationship? And that really fucked with my mental health. That's when I started spiraling and questioning me and questioning, maybe my mum had the right idea. Maybe sleeping around and not getting too attached is what I needed to do. But then I would think about actually performing that, and then it's so far from the kind of person I am that I couldn't do it. And then I felt like a failure because I'm like, well, why can't I just easily give myself away like other people, like the people I surrounded myself with, who thankfully I have nothing to do with now. Well, actually, in a horrible turn of events, the girl that my partner at the time, or the boyfriend, had a crush on that was well developed and everyone liked, I now work with after so many years. But we're not going to go down that road. After that, there was a few boyfriends here and there. Nothing serious, nothing major, nothing too bad, until I turned the year I was 17, or between 16 and 17. I dated someone for a year. Once again, started off fine. I really thought there was nothing to it. I thought we were in love. I thought that was it. I thought I'd found my person. And let's be real, who at 16 finds their person? But that person ended up being the worst thing to have ever happened to me. It started really well, then it turned possessive, and then it turned aggressive. It got to the point where I wasn't allowed to leave the room, because at the time he was a chef, and we stayed in the hotel room above the kitchen where he worked for on and off for a while. I wasn't allowed to leave that room. I wasn't allowed to talk to other people. I wasn't allowed to message or call anyone without his permission. Then when I did, he would get very aggressive. Now, he never once hit my face, and I'm thankful for that, and I know not everyone is as lucky. However, I did get, my arms were grabbed, I've been kicked, I've been punched in the stomach, it's pretty much anything you can think of. It doesn't include the face. It's happened at one point or another. And, you know, when I finally got the courage to stand up to him and leave, and I thought everything was going to be fine, he continued. He would follow me. He stalked me. He used to sit outside my work and wait for me to come out. He'd send me flowers and then watch me receive the flowers from his car to my work. My auntie at the time had passed away. We had assumed, and it wasn't the case in the end, but we had assumed it was due to a drug overdose, an intentional drug overdose. Thankfully, she just passed in her sleep, but that's neither here or there. And he found out. I still to this day don't know how he found out. And he would call me and he'd go, if you don't come back to me, then I'll kill myself. I'll just do what your auntie did. Maybe she had the right idea. I'm standing here with a knife and I'll just join your auntie because she knew what she was doing. And it was all of that sort of stuff. And I was horrified. I didn't know whether to be more horrified at the fact that he brought her and that circumstance into it, or the fact that he was even doing this to begin with. And then it got to the point where I had restraining orders. I've gone through about 4 different phone numbers. I've gone through God knows how many Facebook accounts. But thankfully I can say that was the last incident like this. I have had some verbal abuse in some relationships that I've left along the way. However, nothing has been as seriously bad as that one. And nothing's been physical since that one. And, you know, it's really made life difficult in relation to trusting people. And it's really, it's honestly just completely ruined my life. There are so many circumstances and so many things and so many people I could have met or befriended or kept along the way that I haven't, because I have had my guard up so high, so very high. But in the end, you know, we learn. And you know, I've said this before, but it's one of the reasons why I also have my mental health podcast, is I vent about this stuff and I get it out there, and it's my own therapy as well as other people's. And if there's anything I could say to anyone listening right now who is or has gone through this, is you're not to blame. It has taken me so many years to realize that I am not to blame. There is nothing about me specifically that speaks to these people. These are just people who find people to prey on and manipulate. And it can happen to anyone. It can happen to any gender. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you less of a human. If anything, it makes you more human, because you hold the emotions so close to you. You love so much that unfortunately it opens the gate to these sorts of people. And it's heartbreaking and it hurts. But as I've been telling myself for years, and that's exactly why I've got certain lyrics tattooed on me as well, as a reminder to say that there is always a light at the end of that tunnel. I've been suicidal because of these incidents. I've been down that dark rabbit hole, and it's been really hard to get out sometimes. But I have gotten out. And I think if there's anything to take from this, is that you can get out. There is a light at the end of that tunnel.
Ebony has alluded to her own trauma so much in the past and became aware of us after the Minding the Beehive series back in season 2. She had told us back then that while she couldn't bring herself to listen due to her own traumatic experiences, that she absolutely was on board about helping spread the word and raise awareness on all of this. Since we first met, we have seen her beautiful and hilarious personality shine through, and have grown to love her as if she were one of our own family members. We cannot begin to express how proud we are of her for finally speaking out and potentially helping other victims be loud and speak out against their perpetrators and abusers.
Ebony, like all victims and survivors, is a bee. Bees are strong, resilient, yet vulnerable. We must protect bees at all costs, for without bees, we as a human race cannot survive or thrive. With a resounding scream from the US to Australia and worldwide, We want to say fuck abuse, fuck sexual violence, save the bees, protect the bees, and be vigilant. For when you mess with the bees,
you get the hive.
Thank you for listening to A Nefarious Nightmare. Music used in the theme was originally by Ghost Stories Incorporated, remixed by Ryan RCX Murphy. Additional background music is provided by Epidemic Sound. A Nefarious Nightmare is scripted, researched, and produced by Courtney Fenner and Amanda Cronin. I'm Lainey Hobbs, and as always, be vigilant. For when you mess with the bees, you get the hive.